Well, good afternoon, or if you happen to be somewhere else in the world, good morning or good evening. My name is Deanne D. Matthews, and welcome to our second March reading of Black, White, and Red All Over. And this is the regular size copy. Hold on there we go. And then also, if anybody really wants a large print copy, I can make this happen. It just takes a little bit longer for me to print and ship these out. But if anyone wants a large print copy, let me know in the comments. All right, so we have been working our way slowly through this book, and this month we have our women's history theme. So we're working through our way through the women of Black, White, and Red All Over, and it may take a little bit longer to the end of March because I forgot there was a fourth woman, Mrs. Thornton, who becomes very important in the second novel that's coming in this series, and so I do need to mention her briefly. But we started out with Meet Mrs. Agnes Hamilton last week, and we're going to finish up with her today. I had an entirely different way of approaching this in mind last week, so if there's a little bit of discontinuity between the way I ended last week and this week, just pardon me. Today, someone who was very helpful to me in terms of supporting me when I was doing this level, in terms of giving me just support as I was doing it, passed away today of cancer. So I'm going to go a little bit shorter than I thought I was because I'm still working through that and also working through the people on the writing platform I was on then that still loved him. Even though it's Women's History Month, it's important for us to mention the men, Mr. Bruni, who assist us in this process. And so I'm going to go a little bit shorter today than I would have. And I'll probably do a couple more next week so we can get on through. But today we're going to finish up Mrs. Agnes Hamilton. And also that's going to assist us in getting through as much as we're going to read of chapter 3. The fall videos cover chapters 1 and 2. And I'll link to all those. In fact, I'll link to the YouTube playlist so you can see everything that we've done thus far, including last week's reading. All right, let's get started. A recap on Mrs. Agnes Hamilton. Since I designed her I designed her husband, Ironwood Hamilton, who is the lead officer in the story. He's a police captain in Tinyville, Virginia, and he's a white man facing a racially charged issue because the New Black newspaper and the Black community are demanding records on police brutality over the last 10 years. This puts him and all the other police officers in Lofton County in a bit of a position. Now, he's new. He's just gotten back from 23 years of military service, and because the police captain who was there when he was a child was killed in a car accident along with his first lieutenant, there was an opening. And so Captain Hamilton, Major Hamilton from the military, as he's coming home to join the reserve and transition out of the military, ends up getting this position. It's offered to him because his family has long history, honest and trustworthy and fair. His family has that reputation. But there's more to that. You'll have to read the book. A lot of people have mixed feelings about putting him there for reasons that you'll discover as you read it, but they had to find someone who could step into that job and carry it. This is what many people who are in my part of the world, my culture in America, feel is an oxymoron. Ironwood Hamilton is as close as you'll probably get to a compassionate Christian conservative. And I know to many people that's not an oxymoron. But the idea is, I think we've seen over the course of the last 4 years that conservatism has kind of reverted to its roots. If you go back to 1867, you'll find out that the purpose of conservatism was to maintain the right of the white man to govern over everyone else without regard to anything in terms of merit or anything, just because he was white. And the first poster had a white man's foot on a black man's neck. That is the beginning of conservatism. And so those of us in the Black community and other communities look at that as sort of an oxymoron. The question here is another oxymoron that Ironwood Hamilton has to deal with. As we've dealt with police brutality cases, as we've dealt with police killings of unarmed black men and women, we have had to look at, all cops aren't bad. Okay, Ironwood Hamilton is a good cop. So he has to work through this as a conservative, as a Christian, and as a white man. What is he going to do? But because he is a classic conservative from Virginia in many ways, I have been as fair to his character as possible, including designing him a wife that would fit approximately what a man like that would look like. We found it in our last reading. She is very traditional. This is a stay-at-home woman. She has borne this man 11 children. No birth control anywhere out here. And she has done this while he goes back and forth from deployments for 23 years. They've been married, well, he was in West Point for the last couple of years of that, but for more than 20 years, he's been going back and forth to deployments. So she's kept all the home fires burning. She's very much a traditional woman. She is sort of the ideal. And even after all that, she still wants to have sex with him. 11 children later. So Agnes has a lot of the characteristics a conservative man would look for, but there are some other things about Agnes that need to be pointed out, because if you want a wife like this, there are certain things that a wise man will do, and Ironwood Hamilton does quite a lot of them, because I have designed him to fit within his paradigm, but also, shall we say, pull out the best parts of the paradigm and also add some, I'm sorry y'all for my conservative, a couple of liberal things, such as understanding that the value of a woman is more than her ability to be young, beautiful, and have a lot of children. Women are not, let me just say this, there are a number of conservative men today who are very open and vocal online about the kind of woman that they want. Cook, clean, have sex on demand. And sometimes I think they don't remember. The last time you could buy a woman just for that was 1865. And no, we're not going to turn the clock back on that. No. A woman has an intellect, will, volition, that is, volition or will and intellect, goals and dreams of her own. And a good marriage will not just be her becoming a maidservant. A good marriage will also have that man loving her for who she is, and also as she permits him to achieve his dreams, also her enabling her to perceive her dreams and understanding that the more he does for the right woman, the more they both benefit. And Agnes, in her subtle way, is sort of a demonstration of how this works best, without ever questioning the conservative role that she fits in. She shows something remarkable of what happens when a man takes a woman seriously in terms of her intellect, in terms of her abilities, her gifts, her talents. What can happen for him? Because as we'll see, reading the book, I'm not going to get into all of it, the fact that she has these abilities actually keeps Ironwood Hamilton out of a lot of trouble in this story. It's subtle, but it's there. All right, let me read what I intend to read today, and we'll have a brief discussion. I'll get into the rest of that. This is also from chapter 3. In which we met Mrs. Hamilton last time. The background is that Captain Hamilton and Captain Lee have gone out and done some investigation, and they come back home. Homeward to the Hamiltons, who were in full hue and cry. With school being out, all of the children old enough to work on hammered-up jewelry were assisting their mother, and even the 4 littlest were involved. Sisters Eileen and Allison were showing the different colors and sizes of bead and bangle to their baby brothers, Ira and Agnew. Agnew, like his mother, was sharper on colors, and Ira, like his father, on shapes. Both were having a grand time, showing off their piercing treble voices in their excitement as their sisters cheered them for finding the right objects. Addison, who was in charge of the Hammet Up weblog, was getting plenty of hilarious footage to work with there. Orton and Edward, each 10 years old, had more substantial work. They had the charge of going through all the bulk items the business ordered and sorting them into likely items to go together. The 2 Bellas were very competitive and vied for delivering the best and biggest sorts to their sisters Agnes and Iris and their mother, who quickly and expertly made intricate jewelry out of them. Adela, home for the summer, was acting as a model. Addison's other job was to get plenty of beautiful stills of her wearing the finest works the family business had to offer. In this work, Addison also acted as talent scout and lit right into his cousin Harry as soon as he arrived. "Oh, hey, Cousin Harry, I've been waiting for you to get here. We have a ton of shots of Dad wearing our new cufflinks and tie pins and men's rings, but he's long and loose, and we need some stocky built looks, too." Captain Lee delayed too long in his confusion, and Agnes, Iris, and Adela came to get him, singing in glorious three-part harmony. Oh, we just love Cousin Harry, and we know that he loves us. So we'll doll up our Cousin Harry. Folks will not do about, we'll go out about anything that he wears. Your new career may have just found you, Captain Hamilton said with a chuckle, as his three eldest daughters and second son led their cousin away. I want a cut of the profits, dag blasted! But he was laughing as he surrendered. There was a lot of laughter and fun in the Hamilton house, even as the industry continued by necessity. Mrs. Hamilton's dream of making a product line of necklaces 25 years earlier had blossomed along with the growth of the family, providing necessary income to support its growth. Everyone attended to it, even and especially Captain Hamilton, who at the end of whatever day still kept track of the books and dealt with suppliers at home and abroad. His eldest son, Ironwood Jr., was streaking through business school, owing to the experiences he had as the family business grew up with him. And he still pitched in, even as he traveled to study international business with market research and contacts. It was all a blessing to the captain's thinking. The business had kept a point of common family productivity together wherever and whenever they were apart for each other, which had been often, because of his long military service. Yet he had called every day that he could just to speak with every member of the family, and then every 8 or 9 days, no matter what was going on, his wife received his updated input on this, that, and the other thing that helped the family business to grow with the years. His body had to be absent a lot, yet that was the limit, to the best of his ability. Every now and again, Ironwood Hamilton would sit down by his wife and apply his eye for detail to a design. In his travels, he had seen many kinds of fashions. He would sometimes draw from those memories and what his wife had on hand and surprise her with a new idea. So on this Saturday, he surprised her by sitting down and taking the time to draw out an entire necklace design before going to get dinner warmed up. Moonstones, pink mother-of-pearl covered ovals, 10-karat gold setting. I call it steaming and gleaming, he said, and walked off as his wife laughed behind him and began seeing how the piece might come together. Before supper, the Hamiltons' eldest girls and son Addison had gotten their cousin Harry the way they wanted him, and then began the photo shoot, which was difficult to watch without laughing. The rings, the cufflinks, the watch chains, the tie pins, the medallions. They kept coming up with things, and he kept saying, "Y'all are ridiculous!" and yet still taking stunning photos, because he had a stunning sense of pose, even if it was just his hand, his arm, and his neck. "This stuff here is going to go viral," Addison shouted. "Dad, I need you to put on a suit for a minute and your black gloves, and think like Cousin Harry when you put them on." Indeed, Ham It Up would struggle to stay in watch chains after the black-gloved handshakes of Captains Hamilton and Lee, sporting all 6 watch chains in stock. Addison knew his marketing. Finally, everything was put away so that the family could enjoy a high-spirited and relaxed supper, and Captain Hamilton noticed that his cousin Harry was quite relaxed and seemed content, and remained so as he joined in the Hamilton summertime games on the porch and in the yard as the sun began to set and the lights came on. All right, that concludes our reading from chapter 3. Now, there's a lot of other details about the story that you'll have to go read for yourself, but that gives us an introduction to the full spectrum of Agnes Hamilton. Notice something here. Captain Hamilton didn't start the business. He did not have time. He was in military service. It was Agnes's dream to begin to put jewelry together. Now, for those of you that have been in military service, you know that those early years that you have, in terms of being a cadet, and then right afterwards, even commissioned as a second lieutenant, there's not a lot of money to go around. And then you have to deal with as time passes. You're not there to run the business. So you either believe that your wife has it together or you don't. Captain Hamilton's a very traditional man from Southern Virginia. He's a conservative. He may not be the man most likely to enable his wife with a business and then walk off and leave her, just be sending money home. To maintain his home, and they had their son very early in their marriage, maybe, but for her to be spending money on something that does not involve him and that he cannot control because he's not going to be there, I don't know. It's not the kind of thing that a person like me thinks of as a conservative man being likely to do. Although that's probably not a fair assessment, which is why I made that happen. Many conservative wives, if you actually look around and do a little research, they run a lot of stay-home businesses. As it happens, they do a lot of working at home so they can be there with their children. And even in the African American community in the previous generation, you do still find this patterning as well, because many African Americans are actually socially conservative on many things. We just disagree about that part about the white man having his foot or his knee, shout out to George Floyd and his family, on our necks. That we can't deal with. But many are socially conservative in previous generations. So Agnes has this dream of making some jewelry. And, it could be just a hobby. Instead of poo-pooing it like it can never be anything, her husband decides to go ahead and support that. Well, as it turns out, here's what he gets from it. What's in it for me? Well, there's a couple things that he gets. Notice that he has 11 children that now know something about how to make enterprise for themselves, how to operate as actual bona fide capitalists using their talent. These are not young people who are ever going to have to feel dependent on a job. Ironwood Hamilton Jr. is the oldest son, because again, this is a conservative family. Look at what the sons are doing. Ironwood Hamilton Jr. is streaking through business school. He's getting invitations to study business internationally because he grew up understanding what it goes to create a business. The kind of keystone of capital is to create some capital that other people want to buy. He grew up knowing how to do this, watching not his father, but his mother. Adela has got a modeling career already going. Iris and Agnes have usable skills. All of them have usable skills. They know what the manufacturing process is. They know what the process is from manufacturing to supply to creating it. There's another scene in here where Agnes talks about tariffs and what the tariffs that were being put on in 2019 were doing to people like her who really do depend on product from China and that American manufacturing hadn't picked up. Now that was 2019. Imagine what happens in 2020, but that's a little way down the line. We won't get to those books, probably not even this year. But imagine the difficulties that happen from the point of view of understanding what the different political angles do. So you get a sense that she's involved in the politics as well. And she sometimes may have differing opinions from her husband on this subject because, again, he is a military man. It doesn't occur to him as much to question the things that the commander-in-chief does. And at that time, that was John Trump. But Agnes has to look at it from the point of view of a person who's running a business. But as we can see, there are a couple things that Captain Hamilton does. He's involved in the business. He doesn't have control because he hasn't been there to have control. And he doesn't come back and attempt to take it over. This is something that he has used to stay connected with his family. It gives them something else to talk about. It gives them something they can do together, which is important. But this also has brought money in. Now, again, he's a conservative man. What does he do on the day that Ham It Up, which is his wife's dream, begins to make more money than he sends home? What happens when that woman can out-earn you? Now, obviously, she out-earns him in the environment that he's created. So it's not really a big deal, but it is out there. She could leave him and go do this somewhere else. She could leave him and take the business. He can't run it alone. This is not his thing, even though from time to time he'll sit down and make some effort at it. Which also brings something else. She discovered a gift in him he didn't know he had because he's a military man. He may not have been paying attention to the fashions of women around the world, but for that, and occasionally he can now sit down and draw something that she can make happen. So that now there are pieces in their collection that he actually designed. So she helped him discover some gifts he didn't even know he had. because he decided to take a chance and enable her and not have to control it and not squash it because it doesn't fit entirely into what is expected of her. I also should add this. I'm not going to read this in here, but and it transitions to what we'll be talking about next week, the quote Karen of Black, White, and Red All Over. Now, she actually has a variation of a very famous slave mistress's name. It's a variation. I'll get into it next time. But one of the things we're going to have to talk about in talking about the women of Black, White, and Red All Over is we're going to have to talk about the way certain Southern women have enabled racism across the generations and the foolishness up to today because they want a certain standard of lifestyle and they feel like America owes them that just as much as the men do. And they demand that the men uphold this to keep them in their position. This happens, folks. This continues to happen, and we have a representative. But one of the reasons that Ironwood Hamilton is not under the kind of pressure to do the things that some of his police colleagues have done is because ham it up, Hamilton ham it up, his wife's business creates enough income so that he's not in the kind of pressure to provide a big, beautiful lifestyle for 13 people on his own. So in enabling her and financing her and supporting her as she got that business off the ground while he was not there to run it, turns out to be to his benefit because it makes him doing right easier, as opposed to the next woman we're going to meet who is pressuring him to make a wrong decision because of how making a wrong decision makes her feel more secure in who she is because she doesn't have a man to provide for her like that. And so she's trying to pressure other people to bring her in. Well, some of the bad guys in this book, we may meet them in the Fools for April. They have property that they have acquired that they cannot afford. And they're married. And their wives are okay, but at least okay with what they're doing. But chances are, if you read your American history carefully, they're more than okay. They are supporting it. Ironwood Hamilton doesn't have to go through that because his very conservative wife now has a thriving business that all their children are involved in. All of his older children understand how to maintain the business. So it isn't even just Agnes and Ironwood anymore. Their 4 oldest children not only have marketable skills, but are key to maintaining the business. He doesn't have the temptation of having a wife and children who expect him as a white man to go out and conquer the world and whoever may happen to be in his way in order to maintain their lifestyle. They are all engaged on maintaining a modest lifestyle. The house that they live in, Ironwood Hamilton's military checks, plus their business, purchased that house together. And that's what happened because he saw this woman as more than a maidservant. Because when they were young and didn't have much, he still invested in her gifts and talent. Now, I need to say this for the record. This only works, now just, for the sake of the men, this only works if you are with the one God chose for you. And you do this with the wrong woman, she may walk off and leave you and take everything you have. This is true. You do need to make sure that this is the right person before you do that. And of course, Ironwood and Agnes are the right people for each other. The more one invests in the other, the more investment the other gets back. The family flourishes. We'll see this again when we meet Mrs. Varick. Although we meet her very briefly, the fact that her husband is running this big newspaper that's causing all this change to happen has to do with the same kind of dynamic. Okay. For today, we're done. We're done with Agnes. I've already started our transition to the next personality that we will meet, who you will not like as much. But Agnes sets the tone. She and Mrs. Varick and Mrs. Thornton represent the good side here. But of course, there has to be at least one representative of what has been a very destructive phase in womanhood in America across its history, and we'll meet her next time. And I'll try to keep that one short because it's one of those things where it's not a lot to read, but it is something going on that we do need to discuss. I know that in feminism, we tend to think that we should believe women and all of us are standing together, but not all of us want the same things, and it's important to make distinctions. But we'll get into that next week. Thank you for listening. Housekeeping. Housekeeping. Again, I do have copies of this available. Signed copies are available right now during March and April reading. So if you would like a copy of your own, I have it. I have signed copies I can send out. Drop a note in the comments if you'd like a copy of the book. And again, if you want a large print version, I can make this happen, but it takes a little bit longer because setting them up in Amazon is a bear. And by the way, if you must absolutely have a copy of this right away, you can also find a copy of these on Amazon and you can rush ship them. Otherwise, from the time I get your comment to the time we work out payment, PayPal, Cash App, Zelle, we'll work it out. It'll take about a week because we're still going through COVID-19, so I'm not going out every day to drop things off in the mail, but it'll take about a week for me to get everything out the door to you, but you'll see them soon. All right. Thank you for listening. Probably will have 2 readings next week, depending on, you know what? No, because I have my interview with H.D. Campbell next week. So we may have 1 next week and then 2 the following week. We'll see what happens. Anyway, I'll see you all next week. Have a good afternoon, morning, or evening, wherever you are. See you next time.